Hey, Adam here, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be focusing on the UK, and I've got two odd disappearances that I wanted to share with you, followed by a collection of less known disappearances that have occurred in Scotland. So to kick things off, let's start recent and in Hampshire. Let's start with Richard Charles Morris. Now, Richard was actually the former British ambassador to Nepal, and from what I understand, he was in office from 2015 until 2019, and he was actually set to become the next High British Commissioner to Fiji in July of 2020. So Richard was well known as a pretty intelligent chap, and I won't go into too much depth, but he had studied at various universities, including, and I'm going to butcher this one, Aberystwyth University, the University of Illinois in the States, and the Aston University. His intelligence wasn't his only skill though, and Richard actually had a passion for long distance running, and had actually completed a marathon on Mount Everest in 2019, which is a pretty impressive feat to say the least. Now, Richard was 52 years old when he disappeared on the 6th of May 2020 from Bentley, which is located in Hampshire. So Richard had gone on a jog that day, but he failed to return home. The first we actually hear about this comes from the news outlet Get Surrey, who reported this. Richard Morris hasn't been seen for almost 12 hours. Police have issued an appeal for information after a Farnham man went for his morning run and hasn't been seen since. Richard Morris from Bentley went out to exercise at 10:30 this morning. It's important to note too that Morris's disappearance was stated as being completely out of character. On the 7th, the authorities appealed to the public for help in finding Richard, as they just had absolutely no idea where he'd gone to. Only adding that his family, were obviously concerned for his welfare. I've got to say as well, that when it comes to missing persons, just in terms of reporting on these incidents, it really does feel like the UK is leagues behind other countries. You know, it can be very difficult to find any information, and when you do, it's often, or sometimes at least, it's bare bones, unless the disappearance gained any kind of traction. Whereas, when I report on disappearances from Australia or the US, for example, there seems to be a plethora of information in most instances. I'm not really sure why this is the case, but it has been something I've noticed over the last few years. Anyway, the next update comes from the Hampshire and IO News. They actually posted this information to their Facebook page. This is what they stated. A government worker, Richard Charles Morris, who was set to start his new role in July 2020, has been missing from the 6th of May 2020. A major search is still underway in the village of Bentley, Farnham, and surrounding areas to desperately locate Richard, who went for a run and has not been seen since 10:30 AM on the 6th of May. The major search continues with the assistance of Hampshire Constabulary, Hampshire Search and Rescue, Dog Search and Rescue Teams, Air Support, the UK Missing Persons Bureau, and other agencies are involved due to Richard's role. The government have also been made aware that Mr. Morris is missing. I'd just like to point out, as often as we do on this channel, that the search dogs could not find Richard's scent, and as a result, that search ended in failure. I would just like to point out as well that studies have shown that search dogs are around 75 to 80% effective in locating missing persons. So the norm would be that the search dogs are successful. However, the disappearances that I look for, this is specifically not the case. Now, there were some updates on the 10th, and these mostly consisted of just new information on Richard's high-profile background and the positions he held. I'm not oblivious to the fact that his background could be integral, or at least very important to the disappearance, but there's very little I can say about that, as it would be nothing but speculation, and there's just no evidence to suggest that was the case. The 11th is where the press really started to pick up the pace on reporting on Richard's disappearance, and they finally became interested because you can just see the explosion of new articles being written at that time. So the authorities basically stated that they had no idea where Richard had gone, nor did they have any real idea as to what had happened here. They also stated this: "We are now asking residents in the surrounding areas if they could assist by checking sheds, outbuildings and gardens. We would like to reassure people that we have professional search teams conducting a thorough search of local areas and would respectfully ask members of the public not to attempt to look for Richard outside of your own property. This is so search teams can accurately monitor all areas that have been police searched to a professional standard, and so potential tracking can be conducted by the search dogs. The Foreign Office then stated that it was extremely worried about Richard's disappearance, and the authorities actually deemed Richard at high risk just because of how he went missing, which I found quite interesting, and I agree, of course. This didn't actually register with me at first, but the area that Richard disappeared from was basically bordering the South Downs National Park, whose forests were now being scoured at this point. So Richard was a regular participant in the weekly Alice Holt Run, which is a 3-mile course and goes around the forest there. Alice Holt is actually a forest as well. So it's reported that alongside the dog teams and the aerial components of the search, a marine unit was also sent into the park. You know, obviously accidents can happen at any time, and that seems to have been the official line of thought. It's difficult to imagine that a man who basically conquered the marathon on Mount Everest is then going to struggle in an area that he's completely familiar with. Though that's not to say that that can't happen, just that it seems unlikely. From what's been reported, it doesn't appear that Richard had any underlying health conditions that could have caused some kind of, sudden accident. There wasn't much in the way of updates until the 17th, where the police began requesting dashcam footage from anyone that was in the area at the time. The BBC also reported that 50 specialists, drones and search dogs had basically been in the Alice Holt forest the entire time, and that's going to become important soon. And it's also interesting because what you can glean from that is that the dogs could not find Richard's scent, indicating that he was either very well hidden or he simply wasn't there. The Rising Nepal Daily reported that as per the 19th, the search actually intensified, meaning that it was growing in size. I can actually imagine this to be the case too, because Richard was a high profile man and had sensitive security clearances. So it makes sense that those who would be able to influence the search for Richard would do just that. However, the search effort began to be scaled back on the 3rd of June after absolutely no trace of Richard was found. Just as a comparison though, this was 28 days after the initial disappearance. Normally, you start seeing searches scaled back around 2 weeks in. Now, I don't actually have any official data on that, and I haven't been collecting it, though when you read about these disappearances, that does seem to be around the 2-week mark when that happens. Now here's a statement by Chief Inspector Alex Reddin. It has now been 28 days since Richard went missing, and we continue to be very concerned for his welfare. I would, however, like to reassure the community that there is no evidence of foul play. We have conducted an extensive search of local woodland and over 3.5 square miles, as well as over 1 mile of the River Wey and a large section of railway. I want to reassure you that although the search phase is being scaled back, our investigation into Richard's disappearance is ongoing and any new lines of inquiry will be thoroughly investigated. We are asking the community to remain vigilant and report anything untoward. If you do see anything that might be connected to Richard, please phone straight away. While there might not have been any evidence of foul play, if you told me that they didn't at least suspect something untoward behind the scenes, I wouldn't believe you. Let's be honest, because of Richard's background, the search will have been extraordinarily extensive and massive resources will have been poured into this, especially since it spanned across 28 days and had government support. If he was inside the forest at that time, it's difficult to imagine that this search effort couldn't locate a single trace of him. I of course don't know, but the idea that Richard may not have been in the forest then should not be ruled out. Though with a total lack of evidence, there isn't a whole lot you can really do with that, so that's not a criticism of anyone. It's also worth pointing out that this was a pretty rural area which Richard disappeared from, and it's actually not that far away from the place where Gaia Pope disappeared in 2016. It's around 60 miles or so. I'll leave a link to my coverage on that in the description below if you're interested in hearing about that. Let's skip forwards to the 31st of August now, because this is when they found Richard's body. Here's what was reported by the BBC. Police searching for a missing British diplomat have found a body in a forest in Hampshire. Officers said that the body was discovered in the Alice Holt forest and the passing was not being treated as suspicious. Police previously searched the forest. Or in other words, Richard was found in an area already searched where search dogs had failed to find his scent. It's also worth noting that it wasn't actually officially confirmed as being Richard on the 31st, however we find out on the 16th of September that it was actually him. It's also worth noting that Richard was found by a member of the public, and this was around 3 miles from his home. Now we have some interesting updates on the 23rd of September, and I quote, "Initial investigations have yet to establish how a diplomat whose body was found in a forest months after going missing passed away," an inquest heard. "The cause of passing following a post-mortem examination on the 52-year-old's body has been recorded as unascertained," Senior Coroner Christopher Wilkinson said. Mr. Wilkinson said, "Consultant forensic pathologist Dr. Russell Delaney," I may have butchered that last name, I apologise, "carried out the initial examination on the body," adding, "The nature of his passing is at this stage unascertained." Is that not completely familiar at this point, or what? How many times have we heard almost that exact sentence? It genuinely doesn't even surprise me anymore when I read that. You know, what they are effectively saying is that they have absolutely no idea how this fit and healthy man passed away. I imagine there were no signs of injury present, or they would have a good idea as to what may have happened. So once more, we have a man that has just suddenly passed away with potentially no injuries whatsoever. It's important to note though that the body will have been pretty decomposed at this point, so that could have masked what otherwise might have been found. I'm not sure. I can only quote the pathologist. And there's something else glaring here that makes no sense to me, and I can't believe nobody's questioning this. So Richard's body was found roughly 4 months after he disappeared. All search efforts for him failed, including aerial searches and search dog teams. That in and of itself may suggest that Richard was not in that location for the entirety of his time missing, because that area was searched and then that's where he was later found. Or let's not even go down that road, let's play along. If Richard's body was there the entire time, that has to mean that, for some reason, Richard, who knew this area like the back of his hand, massively deviated from the trail and headed off deep into the forest. That assumption must almost certainly be true, because if he was on or near the trail, he would have been located quickly. So that means, for whatever reason, Richard strayed massively from the trail. Also, that is not conducive to the idea that perhaps he'd had a sudden medical emergency, such as a heart attack, because in that event, he would have fallen in the place he was running, which would have been on the trail. There wouldn't have been chance to go completely off trail and venture to a place that was seemingly the most difficult place in the world to find, that he could have gotten to. The only way in which that makes sense is to suggest that for some reason that we're not aware of, Richard became incredibly confused, which, at least from the reporting, he doesn't seem to have a history of. So what happened? Could he have been pushed in that direction? And I don't necessarily mean physically, but was there someone nearby that was causing him to feel uncomfortable, so he deviated? There's no evidence of that. If the authorities are convinced that there was no foul play, then I just can't imagine that to be the case. Secondarily, if the post-mortem also didn't find anything that may point in that direction, then there's absolutely no evidence to suggest that that was the case. So I would repeat, what in the world happened then? The size, intensity, and length of the search really does suggest to me that he may not have been there the entire time. I would have expected him to be found during the initial search if that was the case. Something just feels really off about this one. I couldn't explain to you what it is, there's just something that's not adding up. It's also worth adding that the Alit-Holst Forest Park covers around 2,100 acres, so it's not like this is a massive area to the same scale that we talk about, in various US wilderness disappearances. It's well frequented by hikers, joggers, dog walkers, cyclists, horse riders apparently. Yet Richard's discovery was only 4 months after the fact. That's the end of the paper trail, by the way. What you basically get from the press amounts to nothing to see here, folks. The next inquest is going to take place in June of 2021, but as far as the press is concerned, that's basically the end of the story, because there's no updates at all after about the 24th of September. How anyone can look at this disappearance and say, yeah, that's completely normal, is beyond me at this point. There just seem to be many factors that remain unexplained, and I won't go over them again, but I'll finish this segment by asking you for your thoughts instead. So please do leave them in the comments below. Do you think that this is odd? Or have I just got a really bad take here? Do let me know. Now, let's explore the next disappearance. Nida Nasir was 18 when she disappeared from Newport on the 28th of December 2013. According to the Daily Record, A major police search is underway to find a missing teenager who vanished after taking out the rubbish. Police and family of 18-year-old Nida from Newport in South Wales are becoming increasingly concerned for her welfare after her disappearance 4 days ago. The teenager has not been seen since she steps outside to go to the bins outside of her home at 8 PM on Saturday. It's worth mentioning because it wasn't said in this article, but it's cold at this time of year and Nida had gone outside without her shoes or her coat, which is a bit odd, but perhaps can be explained if she thought that this was just going to be a quick trip to the bin. So the article continues. Police sniffer dogs and up to 40 police officers, some on horseback, have today been searching open areas around her home in teeming rain. Extra officers have been drafted in after they became available when bad weather caused the cancellation of the local football match. The teenager, whose disappearance is out of character, is also in need of medication, without which she is likely to become anemic. The Chief Inspector, Daniel Taylor, who was leading the search operation, then made a statement. This is what he said. She has gone missing from her home address. That is particularly the reason for the concern. There is no motive for it. As far as we understand it, she went out to the bins at the premises. That was the last time she was seen. Forensic teams have examined the area and extensive searches have been carried out in the neighbourhood. There is no forensic evidence that she has been taken. On the 5th of January, we learned some more information in regards to Nida leaving the house. While the family did believe that she was taking the bins out, it looks like she was also going out to get some air too, because according to the Daily Mail, a row about university had taken place before she went outside. I'm sure that you can imagine how the press will have jumped on that and emphasised it, but Nida's father appeared on ITV where it was stated that the reporters had actually taken the argument out of context. He basically made the point that while there was a row about university, it was hardly serious enough to cause her to leave and never return. And you've got to be careful as well, because the press do love to emphasise certain things, so I think it's much safer to defer to the opinions of the authorities on the matter and, how serious they believed it to be. Anyway, it's on the 5th where we actually learned that Nida had gone out without her shoes, mobile phone or her jacket. Nida's sister stated, "Nida is very close to us and would always share everything with us. It is just out of character. She can't live without a phone. She's always talking to me on the phone." She then went on and said that there was no indication that Nida had in any way prepared to leave before she disappeared. Nothing was packed or anything like that. She said everything is at home, her purse, everything is there. She hasn't even taken her coat, nothing. There was some confusion about the university situation at first. Some of Nida's friends elaborated on the situation, and it looks like what had happened is that Nida wanted to go, but her parents were against the idea. And it looks like it was because of financial reasons, and that was the source of the disagreement. A friend of the family later came forth and spoke with the press, and she said her mother came out of the house to tell us what had happened. She said that Nida was angry and left the house without her shoes or jacket. Another friend stated she was disturbed about university admission and finance problems. She couldn't go, so had to start a different course at college. On the 7th of January, we actually learned even more information about the disagreement. While it does appear that there were financial problems, there was perhaps an even bigger problem preventing Nida from attending university. A year prior, the family had attempted to seek asylum in the UK, but were turned down. It's this that barred her from attending the university. Some reports at the start were trying to make out as though the family just didn't want her to go to uni, but it's actually a bit more complex than that. And the father stated that he was happy for her to attend university, it's just that they didn't have a way to make it happen at that time, and he couldn't provide her with what she wanted. Nida's sister believed the disappearance solely stemmed from this upset. Superintendent Mark Warrender stated that there had been no sightings of Nida since she left their home. He said that officers are sifting through hundreds of hours of CCTV and that forensic examination of her phone was taking place. He also said that they are keeping an open mind, but this is a real mystery as to what had happened. Over the next couple of weeks, the family were becoming quite desperate for answers and were continually appealing to the public for help. On the 18th of January, the police released this statement. Nida's disappearance really is a mystery, and one line of inquiry is that Nida may well not want to be found. She is an adult, and if she wants to stay away, that is her choice. but her family are desperate to know that she is safe and well. Our message to Nida would be that even if she doesn't want to return home for whatever reason, we would urge her to get in touch with anyone she feels comfortable contacting. I get why this line of thought was being explored, but it's almost like we're to completely ignore the fact that she left without footwear, a jacket, a phone, money, medication, or anything of that nature. To suggest that she left on her own accord seems, to me, with everything we know so far, to be quite unlikely indeed. From the perspective of the authorities though, you can at least see why they had to explore this idea. Nida disappeared without a trace, there were no sightings of her after her disappearance, and there was no evidence to suggest that anything untoward had happened. The authorities were in possession of Nida's phone, so if there was anything odd or pointing towards this being deliberate, then we would have known more on that front. From my point of view, it seems more likely that as Nida stormed out, she may have put rubbish in the bin or whatever then happened, and it was at that point that something unexpected happened. It's also worth noting now that it doesn't appear that the search dogs found her scent at any point during the search. On the 24th, Nida's father stated this: "It's been more than 3 weeks and we still haven't found any clues. We are very worried about Nida and her safety, and we are appealing again and again." At this point, we're jumping ahead to the 27th of March 2014 because this is when Nida's body was found. Here's what was reported by the BBC. The family of missing Newport teenager Nida Nasir have been told that the police have found a body. Gwent police said they were called to Newport wetlands at West Nash Road on Thursday morning where a body had been discovered. The passing is being treated as unexplained and police said that a post-mortem examination was to take place. Nida was found around 4 miles from the location she disappeared from at a nature reserve, and Natural Resources Wales, who manages the wetland, stated that the body appeared to have washed up onto an area of salt marsh. On the 28th, the body was confirmed as Nida. The South Wales Argus updated with some more information on the finding. Nida's body was found at around 10 AM yesterday on the estuary side of the seawall at the wetlands site near the East Usk Lighthouse. After this, there's basically radio silence up until the 23rd of October 2014. This gets interesting now. Here's what was reported by Wales Online. Mystery still surrounds the passing of a teenager who left their home barefoot in the middle of winter, an inquest has heard. The inquest at Newport Civic Centre heard that she might have fallen from a bridge into the River Usk. However, with no confirmed sightings after she disappeared and a post-mortem examination revealing no signs of injuries, questions still surround her passing. Coroner David Bowen said, "Police investigations failed to find any evidence as to when, how, or in what manner Nida's body entered the river. How this happened is pure speculation, and this inquest is not concerned with speculation, it is concerned with the facts." Nida's father described his daughter's disappearance as a mystery. "From the evidence that I've heard, I am satisfied never has such a description been more appropriate. It is not possible from the pathology to say how Nida passed away, but I found no evidence to suggest that she had been assaulted prior. I am not able to ascertain the medical cause of Nida's passing." Dr. Robert Francis Allen, who was a rivers and tidal expert, weighed in on the police's request and he stated, "On the night of Nida's disappearance, the River Usk had been placed on flood alert and the nearest access point from the street Nida disappeared was Southern Distributor Bridge. It is not possible to determine when, where or how Nida's body ended up in the water." I've just now found one final article that I think summarised this disappearance really well and actually provides some slight further insight, so let's have one final look. Wales Online reported, "Nida's father was in the front room with his grandson on December 28 when his daughter suddenly got up and walked out at around 7:10 PM. The father said there was a disagreement over cultural matters that evening. Nida was sat downstairs with me and her nephew when suddenly, without warning, she got up and left the room. As she was not wearing winter clothes or any footwear, I thought she must have gone to put something in the bin outside, but when she didn't return, I got anxious. I have had no contact with my daughter since she left the house on December 28. I cannot explain why she left the house. The family disagreement would not have been the reason. Earlier in the year, she had been upset over her inability to pursue her chosen education at university. her disappearance is a complete mystery. The coroner also stated that he found no evidence of any injuries to her body, not anything to suggest that ropes had been used, or that she had suffered from a fall from height. Okay, so I felt that was important because so far, the reporting has indicated that there was some kind of argument about university right before she left. However, the final report seems to indicate that all conflict in regards to university seems to have happened in the past, before that night. It seems that as per the article, there was actually some sort of argument about cultural differences that night, of which the family don't believe that was the cause for leaving the home. It's also important to note too that the father was a motorised wheelchair user, and I'm not certain of what disabilities he had, but it's certainly worth bearing that in mind. This is an odd one, and it's just bizarre how she ended up in the water without being seen by anyone or picked up on CCTV at any time. You'd think that if Nida travelled to the bridge on foot, she would have been seen on CCTV at some stage, making her way there. Or someone passing would have seen her there. Except they didn't, and that never happened, so what in the world happened to her? Also, you'd think that if one leapt from a bridge, the coroner would have found evidence of some sort of fall, since hitting water like that from a distance causes quite the impact. This is someone that disappeared without a trace and was then found months later washed up with no sign of injuries, and the coroner couldn't determine a cause of passing, going as far as saying that the word mystery sums up this incident perfectly. I'm sure questions must have arose as to whether this was, an intentional act, and while it's not like you could ever say for certain, it's difficult to explain away how she wasn't captured on CCTV at any point making her way there. The police said early on, and they maintained that they could find no evidence whatsoever of foul play or any kind of third-party involvement, which, while not fully confirmed, the coroner's findings, or actually perhaps the lack thereof, seemed to coincide with what the police were saying. It's difficult to really know where to go with this one. I'm just genuinely quite surprised at the total lack of CCTV footage. I'd quite like to hear some conversations on this one. Do you have any opinions or thoughts on this one? Because it seems fairly difficult to explain without foul play. I'm going to move on to the next segment now though, because similar to everyone else who's worked this case, there doesn't seem to be any meaningful conclusions that could be drawn here. So with that, let's explore the final disappearances. I actually came across a number of separate disappearances in Scotland that I wanted to share. There are actually quite a lot of missing hikers in Scotland who have never been found, or hill walkers I should say. The reporting on these incidents is somewhat bare bones, so I unfortunately can't go into too much depth, but I did want to mention them nonetheless. The first disappearance occurred on the 30th of May 2015, in which 62-year-old Eric Sill disappeared in the Mamore mountain range near Fort William. Eric's wife stated that he wasn't someone who just went up for a jolly. He knew the mountains and had been doing it for years. In bad weather, search teams scoured this area with dogs, helicopters and drones, and over 5 years later now, no trace of him has ever been found. Eric's wife seemed to find the disappearance odd, and I can see why. This is a well-frequented area in that it's a fairly popular hiking spot, and as said, despite all of that time passing, there hasn't been a single trace of him found. Tom Brown, who was 65 years old, disappeared on the 1st of July 2015, and we're talking about a very small proximity to Eric here. Tom also knew the area well and disappeared during his travels. 8 days after he disappeared, his rucksack along with all of the contents were found a mile east of Steel Falls, fairly close to a river. Apart from that, no other clues, nor any trace of him has ever been found. Robin Garton was reported missing in the Glencoe area in late September of 2015. Robin's body was actually recovered though, unlike the others so far, and it was actually found 8 months after the disappearance. There was an interesting quote from the Glencoe MRT deputy leader, Brian Bathurst, who stated, "The body was found in an area that we had started searching at the very beginning." Or, in other words, Robin's body was found in an area that had been previously searched. On the 3rd of May 2016, 56-year-old Gofreda Bondinelli from Germany disappeared in Scotland. Gofreda had planned a hiking and camping trip between Glenfinnan and Lochilort. I've probably butchered that one, but there we are. Authorities said that he was an experienced hiker and that he was well equipped. He nor any of his belongings have ever been found, and this is despite an extensive search including helicopters and of course search dogs. There are many others too, but finally let's quickly talk about 61-year-old Jim Robertson. Jim was incredibly experienced and he had climbed all 284 Munros in Scotland, which from what I understand are the peaks of the hills. Jim disappeared without a trace on this trip, but his body was located around 2 months later. Now I want to make it clear actually that I can in no way verify this next part, but while researching this disappearance, I came across a person that I'm going to keep anonymous here. This person is from this particular area and claims to be fairly close to a policeman also from the area who told him a couple of things. He was told that Jim was an experienced climber and an ex-soldier. He said that he was told that Jim was fit, very efficient and experienced in the woodlands. He said that the officer showed surprise when Jim wasn't located in the search. And this officer apparently also spoke about a gamekeeper who manages the general area around where Jim had disappeared from. This gamekeeper had apparently reported seeing a massive dog or wolf in the area. He said "or wolf" because he said that he hadn't seen anything like it before. Now, from what I understand, the last reported wolf was put down in Scotland in 1680, though some reports indicate that wolves may have been present up until the 18th century, and one even states until 1880. I can't imagine that it was actually a wolf, though I suppose a very small population could exist in the area. I highly doubt that, mind you, though you'd expect a gamekeeper to know what he's looking at, and he also apparently said that he was worried that it was aggressive. The man in question then wondered if this animal had spooked Jim, causing him to wander into an area that he didn't intend on going to, or had caused him to make a mistake and fall or something to that effect. That of course is total speculation and I can't verify any of that, so it's important that we're all just aware of that. But what an odd thing to lie about. I'm not sure why someone would choose to do that, so I thought I'd share it. There's no evidence at all of that being the case, just comments on whether Jim had been spooked or not. Because Jim was so experienced and people in the area knew each other quite well, perhaps it was just a way of trying to explain what had happened. The condition of the bodies that were found, including Jim's, were never actually reported to the press as far as I can tell, so I can't really comment on that. You'd imagine that if it looked like someone had been mauled or bitten, that would have been mentioned, so I doubt that anything untoward had happened in that regard. Anyway, that's enough from me. I'm going to end this one here. Thank you very much for watching. Please do leave a like if you found the video interesting, or a dislike if you didn't. I don't mind too much, I'm just looking for your honest opinion. I'd also just like to say a massive thank you to the patrons who help make these videos possible, so thank you all very much. Other than that, I hope that you've had a great day or evening depending on where you are, and I'll see you next time. Peace.